All right, guys. Good morning. I didn't get anybody to take me up on having a Google chat other than Trevor. Trevor is also an early riser as I am. He actually woke up at 5 today, beat me. I was up at 5:30. But we were just talking about that, how there's a lot of people in this business that are really early risers. If you guys aren't early risers, and you think that you're not a morning person and you can't get anything done, I've been there before. Before I started waking up really early, I thought the mornings were just not for me, and I just was kind of groggy and I didn't feel good. Maybe it's a part of getting older. You start getting a little more comfortable with it. But if you're sort of the type that sleeps in on Saturdays, you got to remember, Saturdays and Sundays are your golden days to really be very productive and crank out tracks and build up your catalog, especially if you have a full-time job and you don't have a lot of free time to do this kind of stuff. So don't let any of this great, awesome free time slip away just because you're passed out and sleeping. So if that means you got to go to bed early, try to go to bed early. As you can see, Trevor and I are already, whatever, it's 8 o'clock. I'm already like 2 hours, 3 hours into my day. Trevor's already 3 hours into his day. So if you're asleep right now during this thing and you didn't even catch this or even see that we were doing this chat, you've missed out on 3 hours of productivity. So it's something I would encourage you guys to at least give a shot. Try waking up early. I know it sucks. You put that alarm clock on and it comes on. You're just like, hell no, I'm not getting up. Just force yourself once. Just try it. Go in. And what I do is, like, sometimes if you really are not feeling like you want to wake up, force yourself to go and do the shower. Like, immediately go to get a nice warm shower for yourself. It'll wake up your senses. You'll actually feel much better immediately after the shower. I promise you, within like 3 minutes of being in the shower, you actually won't feel nearly as tired as you do just kind of like, lurching into it. But when you wake up early, you might actually find that your productivity goes through the roof right off the bat. So good morning, Trevor. How you doing, man?
Good morning. Yeah, let me my routine. I had to really make something like serious for this to happen because I have switched from a up until 1 a.m. to up at 4:30 to 5, or up until that time and then wake up at 4:30 to 5. And what I did is I did three things. The shower thing that you're talking about. I have a pot of coffee that makes itself at a certain amount of time, or at a certain time. So I set like a timer, and then I downloaded like a sleep app that like listens to you while you sleep, and then it like determines when your like sleep cycle is over and when the right time to wake you up is. So there's actually like a 30-minute gap where you can get woken up at like the optimum time. And I tried it out and it works really well. So I like it.
So wait a minute. It listens to your sleep, and when you're restless, it'll wake you up, or how did that work? I didn't get that.
So the way that it's explained to me anyway in the app is that it can track, depending on how much you move, like how much noise you make, your REM and your non-REM or whatever. And so it tries to wake you up when you're coming out of REM, like when you're on your way out of REM. So the more restlessly you are, like you're already kind of moving and stuff, it'll try to wake you up instead of like your alarm waking you up like deep into REM sleep, because you're going to wake up like, oh my goodness, I'm tired, as opposed to you were already kind of waking up and then it just wakes you up.
Now, I wouldn't do that like at 3 in the morning though, or something, would it?
No, it gives you like a little gap of time that you pick, and then it goes somewhere in here. You'll probably be safe to be woken up. But no, yeah, it doesn't like wake you up randomly. Like, I think you're gonna wake up right now. Yeah, because it shows like you go up and down while you sleep. Like you go from REM to non to REM to REM. So
that's interesting, because I do know. I noticed for sure. Some days, I mean, I wake up at pretty much the same time most days. It's around 5:30. That's kind of my wake up time. But I find that some days I wake up and it feels like a truck just hit me, and it's like, oh my God, there's no way I'm getting out of bed. And then other days I'm like, all right, let's go. And so you might be right. Like, that's probably what it is, right? I'm in certain different cycles. And so either I'm in the middle of a really intense dream, and waking up right in the middle of that dream is really traumatic, as opposed to kind of coming out of it, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the theory behind it.
Very cool. So I want to talk about, I had this sort of post the other day, or maybe it was yesterday, that I've been noticing there's not as many submissions coming through for some of the homework assignments, and especially what's been offered this week. Last week, I posted the homework assignment saying, I want you to sort of compose something outside of your comfort zone, just in a genre that you've never composed in, that you're not that familiar with. And the reason for that, obviously, is to kind of get you in the habit of, when you are offered a licensing gig, and you will, I guarantee you this, if you stick in this business long enough, you will be offered a gig to compose in a genre that you don't really know that well. It's just given, because there's just no way that you're going to be a master of all genres in this industry and in the world. So when you get these opportunities and they're asking you to do an Americana country song, and you've been doing rock music your whole life, or you've been doing hip hop, it might be a complete like just 180 for you. You don't know where to go and how to get this new sound mastered. So it was partially to prepare you for that kind of a situation, but also just to get you in the habit and practice really listening to a reference track, really listening to a new style of music, and really paying attention to what's going on in that genre, what makes this track this kind of a track, what makes this track very licensable, why is this the track that they use as a reference, what is it about this track that like shines and sparkles and makes them really want to use it, but they obviously either can't afford it or they can't get permission from the publisher, so they're coming to you to make sort of a sound-alike track. Really getting used to being able to really nail that skill. And Trevor and I were talking just before we went live here that he's had a gig this week that essentially was exactly this. It was a genre, it was a style that he wasn't extremely comfortable with. He hadn't really done a lot with. And so he actually had to practice a little bit. So I'm not going to give it all away. So Trevor, can you just walk us through what happened in your world in the last couple of days?
Yeah, this is this is the second time this is almost exact scenario is played through. Is, you know, a custom type project comes in and the client, you know, gives like a brief. They usually give a brief and they give like tone, some examples, and, you know, like, I don't know, whatever their idea is, maybe a certain type of tempo or whatever, but they have a good idea of what they want. And so you just have to try and provide that. And if those examples are in genres that I can't do, or that I haven't done before, I guess, not that I can't do, that I haven't done before, I'm going to probably spend half the time just learning, because I'm not going to just out the gate be able to do what they want. Because I haven't done it before, like the Americana thing or the one that I just did. I don't even know the genre. It's like dramatic rock, heavy drums type thing. I don't really know, but excuse me. But yeah, so I spend the first half of the time just kind of learning it, trying to understand not only the genre itself, but why the client picked those songs or that reference or those references or whatever, and then basically turning into learner mode, like learning how to do all of this, learning what they want, like learning everything. And then the second half would be just doing it. Just, you know, I didn't even finish or even really make much of a track for the first couple of days. And then the second like 2 or 3 days, luckily there was a good amount of time. Sometimes you have like a day, but luckily for this, there was about a week. And so I had enough time to do the learning time and then enough time to do the actually making music and then submit. And hopefully I get it. It's a big thing, but yeah. And so when you brought up, or when you posted the homework, I thought it was actually a cool idea because it gets you in that mindset before you're forced to be in that mindset. And if I only had like one day to do this thing, like they were coming at us last minute, like I wouldn't have had time I wouldn't have been able to do it. But if in the past I maybe would have practiced, you know, doing something that I normally wouldn't be able to do, and this would have been it, then I would have been like, oh, I did some of that back for no reason whatsoever, but now I kind of get it. You know, it's kind of like like basketball teams, you know, will practice nonstop. It doesn't really benefit them like monetarily, or they're not going to, you know, have more points the next game because they did a whole bunch of layup drills or whatever. But it just gets you ready for the big moment is really the whole point of it. And I probably should have done that more in the beginning of my career. And now I'm kind of I'm like splitting my time in projects where half the time I'm practicing and the other half the time I'm actually doing it, when maybe I have a better chance if the entire time was actually doing it.
Yeah, that's interesting. So like, and especially for a lot of the syndicate members, you guys, if I know some of you guys have some contacts and relationships already and you have obligations. And so I totally understand if like you've got somebody saying, hey, we've got an opportunity to get your music licensed. Of course, that takes precedence over a homework assignment, of course. But if you can squeeze out the time to try to get more involved in homework assignments like this, it's kind of like what Trevor said. The only thing I will correct him on, though, is he said when they practice, it doesn't mean they're going to get more layup points in the next game. Actually, it does, because they're getting more rehearsed, right? So because now they've done all these layups, and I know that's what you meant, but yes, it actually is. He meant to say during practice, you're not going to rack up your points. Of course, you don't rack up your stats as a basketball player during practice to say, wow, look at all these free throws I made and threes that I made. Like those don't go on your points, right?
Exactly.
For your scorecard.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Right. But because you did that, every single week and every day, and you practice, actually it will on your real scorecard when the games come, you actually will. And so it's the same principle here. And I like that Trevor came up with that analogy about this being practice. And it really is that a lot of us were so eager to just, well, a license the opportunity. Here's the music. Here's this, here's that, here's that. And one of the biggest issues that I was having with a lot of your guys' submissions on the EDM opportunity is it's just the references were not being followed. It was like, it was kind of electronic. I mean, that's as close as some of you guys got. It was just electronic, but there was really no modern EDM to it. A lot of the synths were not being followed. The rhythms weren't being followed. The track structures weren't being followed. So a lot of it was just, maybe you guys got a little bit of ahead of yourselves thinking that you just wanted to get excited about an opportunity and throw a track up there. Now, I understand the temptation to do that. I know that when you see an opportunity in front of you, it's hard not to just go, all right, let's go for it. And take the wisdom of what Trevor is telling you now, is that he's been in this industry for quite a while. And it's something he wishes he would have done when he first got started, was just do more practicing. Really, like, imagine you had an opportunity in front of you that wanted to be, this kind of a style of track, and you've never done it before. Get used to, sort of just like enveloping yourself in this new genre. And that's why I told you guys many times, do not just pick out a track and start composing something. Spend at least half a day, maybe a full day, if you've got the time, obviously, in the deadline, to put it in your iPhone, put it on your workout mix, put it on your computer, put it in your home stereo system. Listen to this kind of music for a long period of time, as much as you possibly can, before you even get into the point of putting your reference track in your session and mapping out what your instruments are going to be, because a lot of it's like, you got to kind of know it in your bones, right? It's one thing for you to listen to a track and go, okay, I got that, I got this, I got that. But you really have to kind of, sometimes I feel you have to live with a certain genre of music before it like says something to you, and then you can really resonate with it. I remember there was a style that I got into. This is probably back in the time when Trevor and I were working a little bit more closely, was trip hop, which, if you guys don't know, it's just kind of like this really down tempo, trippy, cool electronic music that was fairly popular a few years back. Now chill step is kind of more in, but that was a genre that I had never produced, never composed. And so I ended up downloading a lot of Massive Attack. I think Tricky was another one. There was a couple of artists that was recommended. And I remember on my way to work, on the way to my day job, I'd plug that into my, I don't think I had an iPhone then. I think I had an MP3 player. I don't know what I had. But, I was just listening to that for days and days and days and days, until I finally started understanding what makes this music authentic. Okay, so authentic is a very, very important thing in this industry. They want the music to sound like it really came from that genre's style of producer. Okay, not like it's your version of that style. It really needs to sound like it came from that world. Okay, so that's why I think spending the time to listen to references is very, very important. So that's what I wanted to kind of stress for you guys, as far as some of you are not submitting to these homework assignments because, like we were saying, it's not going to obviously land you a licensing deal. There's no money attached to it. There's nothing like that. But if some of you guys keep running into walls, like you keep getting rejections from me, you keep getting the same sort of notes where I'm telling you, samples or dynamics, or your mix isn't loud, or whatever the thing is, and you keep running into these issues, this is what these homework assignments are for. That's what these are really designed for. Is so if you keep running into a lot of rejections, it doesn't do you any good to keep submitting to opportunities when you're not fixing the issues, right? And these homework assignments basically are designed to do just that, is to fix maybe one tiny little thing. We're not going to fix everything in one assignment, and that's not what these are for, okay? So, but these are designed to be one tiny little thing that you can start learning, training your brain, training your ears, right? And then by the time you line up 52 of these things, maybe you do one a week, or you'd even do just 30 of them, or whatever we do throughout the year, you're going to have a massive amount of new skills and techniques that are going to help you in this business. And take it from Trevor. I mean, he's been in this for a long time. I also want to talk about productivity, but was there anything else you wanted to add to that, Trevor?
Yeah, just real quick, this like this kind of learn from my mistake here. I have this example that really frustrates me when I think about it, but like Future Bass blew up, right? And I remember when it kind of blew up, and I was like, this is a really cool genre. I'll deal with it when it's time for a project. When I shouldn't have. I should have been like, okay, let me kind of dive into it. Let me take a listen. Let me put some on my phone. Let me like look at some tutorials at how other people are making it. Like, let me really kind of learn it now, so that when time comes, I can just do it. And so projects came in really fast. Other people who had prepared did them faster than I did, and I was stuck with kind of missing out. And it was all because I was like, oh, I'll do it when it becomes time to do it. And it really kind of bit me in the ass there. It just kind of like passed me. And so my learning phase basically was the amount of time that everybody else just did it. And so then by the time I got the genre and stuff, I maybe landed one or two into the project, and then that was it. I was like, dang, I spent most of this time learning and everybody else spent the time doing it. And not because I didn't know the genre. Like, I knew it existed before this project. I liked the genre too. I didn't learn it beforehand, or I didn't even try, And so I missed something because of that.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's very, very wise words for everybody to be learning from this. So absolutely. I think there's it's something obviously that I think even in my own career, I probably would have done more of it if I had maybe more of the foresight of what it would take to actually get more competitive in some of these genres that I don't really produce in, because I did the same thing. It was like, well, I had opportunities in front of me, so I only just focused on what was in front of me. But when those new ones came, it's kind of interesting what you had said about your gig, where you sort of spent, I think you said you spent half a day or maybe a day writing and exploring the genre, but not giving yourself the pressure of this has to be the track that I submit, right? Is that kind of what you said you did?
Yeah, no, I went in with the mindset, because of what I've realized in the past. I went in with the mindset of basically like, these first 2 days are just learning and experimenting. I'm not going to finish a track. I'm more than likely not going to finish or even have a good starting point for a little bit. So let me just learn.
It's so interesting you say that, because that's always my experience. Now, I haven't given myself that much leniency. Maybe I should try doing that. But normally what I do is, if I have to do, let's say, 4 cues for some opportunity, and that seems to be like the number I'm getting a lot these days. It's like, hey, I need 4 cues like this and 4 cues like that. The first cue is always, not always, but a lot of times it's the roughest, because it's like I'm kind of like getting my head around the sound and the references, and it's kind of like your first stab at something. It's not always the most polished. And so a lot of times I have to take the longest amount on the first one, because I'm like, okay, I got to make sure it fits what they're looking for or whatever. But once that first one comes together, it's like you get into a rhythm, and like you kind of get it. Like, there's just something about this track now you understand. I get why this track works and why it's kind of following the references. And so sometimes you do have to sort of allow yourself maybe that extra time the first time through. But it's a really good thing, kind of like segueing in our productivity mode. If I want to kind of just ask you, as far as like, if you had an opportunity in front of you that they needed like 4 cues in the same genre, or even just 2 or 6 or whatever it is, how do you make sure that you're not wasting time, especially if they're all in the same genre? We're assuming, let's say they're all like drum and bass or something like that. How do you make sure that you're not wasting time having to create multiple tracks in the same genre for, the same album? Do you have some sort of like time saver tips that you could share with us?
Yeah, if it's like a genre that I know, like, we'll like take the practice part out of it, because the practice thing is just going to be, it's a bunch of wasted time. There's a bunch of experimenting and learning. That one's kind of a crapshoot most of the time. But once you're actually in it, right, and like, let's say it's a genre I know, they know I can do it, and so they're just like, do 5 of them or whatever, right? You then have to kind of, or at least me, but I kind of at the very beginning think, okay, well, what does this genre call for? What's my way of doing it? Like, I actually have different approaches depending on the genre. I approach EDM way different than I approach hip hop, and so on and so forth. And so I always keep those things in mind, like, okay, what is my approach going to be, and how can I make sure that I do that as efficiently as possible? With EDM or hip hop, if they're really heavy, like hip hop, for example, I need a lot of different types of sample, like a kick sample, a snare sample, a cool sound sample that I want to throw into the sampler. I have in the past, and I always do when I collect sounds, I organize everything by genre because of TV and film, right? And so TV and film is always asking based off of genre. So I organize my samples that way, so that when I go to start working on a track, I'm just like, all right, I just click on anything that I've labeled hip hop for this hip hop project. That saves me a whole bunch of time not going through stuff that just isn't going to fit. And the better you can label stuff, please do, because it just saves you time. If you have hip hop stuff, but it's West Coast, label it that. So that way, if somebody doesn't want West Coast, you don't even have to click on that folder and listen to stuff like that. Sometimes templates help. I had to do an EDM trap project, and so I built a template with just this huge drum rack of just EDM trap. And I'm like, you know what? Those sounds are great. I built this first for this project. I'm only going to use those drum sounds because I don't need to keep trying to find new stuff when all of this works just fine. So I did that, have a couple synths that I know I'm going to use, saved it as a template, saved myself some time so I don't do that over and over again for 5 tracks. All that kind of stuff saves you a lot of time because you're not sifting, you're not organizing yourself, you're kind of doing the organization stuff as much as possible beforehand. So that when you're ready to go, you're just sitting there going, all right, sounds, samples, triggering, layout, and then so layout is a huge one, which took me a long time. But basically what I've started doing, and I don't know how this would work for a lot of people, is I'll actually just take a popular song, I'll mute it, or I'll listen to it, I'll throw it into the session, I'll cut it up into sections and then color those sections and then mute the track. And then at the very top, I kind of have a color coordinated layout that I'm just going to follow. Because if I don't, then I get stuck into the 8-bar loop issue where I make a cool 8-bar thing. Now I don't know what to do. Should I go into a breakdown now? Should I go into a bigger chord? I don't know. But if I just go ahead and say, you know what, I'm committing to this layout beforehand, then I don't got to think about it. Then I do my 8-bar thing and go, okay, now I have all this other places. I know where I'm going to go. I just need to turn that 8-bar into where I'm going to go instead of halfway through an 8-bar loop thing going, okay, where am I going to go with this? And then get stuck on that for hours because I've done that many times.
No, that's really, really powerful stuff. Maybe we have to figure out how to do more of a tutorial on that because that's a really, really, I never even thought about that. The fact, because it's funny, I kind of do that instinctively, but I never thought about that as an approach to make sure you stay out of that. But I actually will, if I normally start with a chorus or sometimes a verse or whatever, but whatever it is, I'll want to go, okay, this is a dope chorus. I like where this is going. It's not fully produced yet, but what I'll do is I'll take either the 16 bars or the 8 bars and I'll go, okay, this is where chorus 1 goes. This is going to be, and I'll actually copy and paste it over here. And then I'll have another one over here. Now these spaces maybe they move around a little bit. Maybe it'll be shorter or longer, but I do, as soon as I possibly can, I do try to create the structure before the track is finished, so that I know, okay, I kind of know where this song is going to go. I know the story it's going to tell. It's going to start here. It's going to land on this chorus, or maybe it starts with a chorus. And then it kind of, like you said, once you give yourself, okay, now I just have gaps to fill. How do I fill this gap? And like you said, it gets you out of that mode of okay, I'm stuck in this little loop and you're doing the same thing over and over again. That's a really, really powerful thing. And then also just how smart, it's always the simple ideas that are the best, but how smart it is to organize your samples by genre. I have never even done that. And I just realized now how powerful that would be for me, that and especially when you do, let's say if you're watching, you're an EDM producer, you probably want to have maybe hard EDM. You want to have maybe dubstep. You can have more trance. You can have all your different subgenres of EDM, and you could literally break everything down into those if you wanted to. Or like he was saying with hip hop, you have club, West Coast, trap. You could have all these different subgenres of hip hop, whatever it is that you do, and that when you need to get something for those, it's like, okay, here's all my trap kicks and snares, or all my trap snares, or however it is that you can organize yourself. But having them organized right, that rather than having to go through, okay, I need a kick, and there's EDM kicks and hip hop kicks and rock kicks, and there are all these different kicks in there, and you have to sample through 100 different ones to find the right one. You guys know that's probably one of the biggest things you burn out on, is getting stuck for 5 minutes trying to find this damn kick sound that you have, it's in there somewhere, you just can't find it. And by the time you find it, you've lost that creativity. And for me, I don't know, maybe Trevor, we can finish on this. When I'm creating tracks, I like to think of myself as a kindergartner with finger paints in the beginning. I want to just throw a bunch of stuff on. This is cool. That's cool. I want to get out of editing mode. I want to get away from self-critique in the beginning. I just want to go with, that's cool. That's awesome. I remember watching an interview with John Mayer. I don't know if you maybe saw him. He gave this interview. I think he gave it at Yale or Stanford or some big school actually. And he said that the mindset that he gets into when he's writing a song is he becomes he lets his ego take over. He just goes, whatever I'm going to do is going to be the best song that's ever been written. And that lyric was awesome. This chord is awesome. He kind of just gives himself a big open space of everything you're doing right now is awesome. Just keep going. And to me, that's kind of like a kindergartner with finger paints going all right, let me just do this and do that. There's really no self-thought of well, those colors don't go together. And I don't know about this. There really is none of that going on in the initial creation phase. but you have to have faith that you will eventually edit it. Like you will cut down the things that don't make sense. You'll take out the stuff that's not that great, but like putting yourself more in this sort of like, just go for it, right? Just put all the colors down, just get all your creative ideas out there, knowing that after you're through, you're done with this creative process, you can go then strip away the things that don't make sense. You can refine things, start EQing things, adding effects. You can kind of do a little bit of the fine tuning things, but just trust that you'll do that. And in the beginning, don't get stuck so much in, I don't know, maybe, okay. But then you get stuck in like editing mode before you've even done the creative mode. But that's how I've always approached it. Trevor, how do you approach it?
That's that's really strong. I actually haven't thought of it that way. Like I get the concept. That's gonna make me rethink a lot of the way I approach things, because that's really smart. I do that. I get stuck in this. I get stuck in two things. I get stuck in the way that it might sound, and then I get stuck in the, is it good enough? And then I spend a lot of time while trying to do that. So that makes a lot of sense of trying to get rid of that and just be like, you know what, just do it. Just fling, colors at the wall.
Yeah, let your track blow. Like my track is clipping most of the time I'm producing. Like,
oh yeah,
I'm not thinking about like, oh, well, that bass is too. It's like if the bass feel like, I'm looking about feeling. I'm all about feeling in the beginning. I'm like, that snare feels good. It's all feeling. I'm like, this is cool. That's cool. It feels good. Yeah, it's clipping right now, but I'll take care of that later. That's kind of where I start with. Obviously, you can't finish a track that way. It's gonna sound like just terrible. But you do have to start in a place of like, this just feels good. Everything's feeling good, and just throw it out there. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I do that half the time. Like I do that with mixing for sure, right? Like I always am approaching composing and mixing as two separate things, and so which is hard sometimes because I'm like, oh, I just want to mix this sound real quick. Just let me fix it real quick, and then you kind of get lost in it. But you try to. I've always tried to kind of stay away from that and do those two things separately. But composing, letting yourself kind of get in the way a lot of the times by thinking too hard about it instead of just being a kid with paint. Is something I definitely would need to work on, and I'm sure everybody in some sense of the way it does. But that's an interesting. I'd like to see that interview because that's an interesting way of thinking of that.
Yeah, I'll try to find it again. And that was actually a big thing for me because I used to do a lot more like songwriting. Like I wanted to write lyrics and full songs and pitch them to artists and all that kind of stuff. And when he said that, I was like, it's like one of those things where it's not like, it's probably something that we kind of all do, but until somebody like crystallizes it in word form, you kind of realize, oh yeah, that is actually really powerful. But the way that he will just kind of like not get in his own way in the beginning, because when you have the editor mode on while you're creating, it's just this constant like gas pedal brake, gas pedal brake, gas pedal brake. Yeah. That, and you want to get that brake pedal out of there, not forever, but in the beginning, so that that in the end you're going to be able to refine it. You can even swap out sounds. You can swap this out. You can change this. I mean, you guys, if you've been doing this for a while, you know that most of the time you go through, and I'm even in my mixing and mastering process at the very end of my tracks, I'm still making changes all the way. Like I'll be at the very end where I'm about to bounce, and then I'll go, you know what? That drum fill doesn't do it for me. Let me change the drum fill. Or this sound effect is just, it's always been bothering me, and now I'm really I've had it. Like I got to switch that out. So, or even a complete melody line or a lead line or whatever. So I do like to stay mostly in MIDI most of the time through. I don't know if you do that, but I am a little bit more. I know people say you should commit, like, bounce down to audio, get rid of that like sort of computer space, and maybe commit to whatever you're doing. But, for me, I do like to have that flexibility. What's your creative process like?
Yeah, that's weird. I don't know why somebody would bounce. Like if they have it and if the plugin isn't like overloading their computer, I don't know why you would bounce.
Some of them do though. I think a lot of people have those overloading issues, and that's
which I get. Yeah. And which I get, then that's cool. But like if you're doing it just to like force yourself to commit, like that in the long run is kind of dangerous because especially for TV and film, like this thing, I have to be available. This thing that I was working on last week, I have to be available all next week because if mine gets picked all next week, I'm going to be basically in contact with the music director or supervisor of the show, doing changes, doing edits, doing all this because they want all this. And if I've got a bunch of audio and they're like, well, can you make this melody? Can you drop it an octave or do this? Like I have to figure out how to replay it. Or I don't know, pitch down the audio, which doesn't always sound good. Like, so that's weird. I would highly recommend not, bouncing the audio unless, it's all done and you got to send stems or whatever. But
yeah, or if in worst case, let's say you're using some massive string library that's completely taken up all of your CPU power. bounce it and then mute that thing and disable your plugin and
Yep.
keep it there, but just disable it. So you keep all the settings there so it's not dragging your computer anymore. And then you can always unmute it, unmute the MIDI, and then you can go back to it. But when I have massive, because especially my orchestral ones, I start running into that issue around like 15 or 20 tracks in. I have like strings and horns and all these things going on, and they're massive libraries. Spitfire and other audio libraries like that, they take up a little bit more, especially contact stuff. A lot of times seems to take up a little bit more on my CPU. So I have to do something like that. But I always, like you said, I do keep the original track. It's just there ready to go. And if I have to go in and just change something, I'll do that. But just to be able to free up my my computer space, I can do that. But that's why I'm thinking about maybe upgrading to the iMac Pro when that comes out.
The new one, the new screen one.
These issues. So, but awesome, man. Any last words before we wrap this one up?
Jeez, I could talk about a lot of this stuff forever, like, and go deeper, which I might do in videos and stuff, but I probably will do in videos and stuff. But
let's leave it there, man. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. So yeah, so for you guys that are sleeping right now, and you're gonna catch this later on, you know, please again try to wake up a little bit earlier. Try to give yourself a little bit more daylight, essentially, more time in the day to be more productive, and find out, see for yourself. Maybe the mornings will be a great time for you to actually get creative. You know, if you've got kids, sometimes kids kids wake up sort of early, I guess, but sometimes the couple of first hours of the day is a time when the house is the most quiet. You know, everybody's still sleeping, everybody's still in their beds, and that's when you can really focus on getting a track started or whatever. Then when they wake up, you know, go do what you got to do, make everybody breakfast, do what you got to do, and then maybe later on you can come back and pick up. I understand, you know, time is limited. We don't all have just like a complete day to be able to crank this stuff out, but that's why it's very, very important to have supportive people around you. I know that I couldn't do this without having supportive people around me that understood that this is important to me. This is something I make a lot of time for, obviously. And even in those early stages and days and years of doing this, obviously most of my friends and, you know, people I was surrounding myself were musicians. So of course they were cool with it. But, you know, you do need to have a supportive group around you to at least help you, if they can help, you know, make some sacrifices, give you some free time, take care of things that would give you a little bit more free time. That stuff is very, very important. So if you can get any help at all from either your wife or your spouse or anybody that can help you carve out a little bit more time for yourself, it really makes a big difference. So I do highly encourage you guys to really communicate clearly with your family members, with your friends, with your roommates, whoever it is that you're living with, to let them know like why this is important to you, why this is something you're spending a lot of time doing. And if they can help in any way, if you need them to help, try to get that from them, you know, try to have them give you any sort of, you know, just a little bit of leg up that you can possibly get for them. It really will go a long way in making sure that you succeed in the long run. So with that said, we're going to sign off now and stay tuned, guys. We're going to do more of these. I wanted some of you guys to join in, but it looks like you guys are kind of all sleeping, or maybe you're a little bit shy or whatever. But we'll try to do this next time, maybe at a later time in the day. But, you know, you got to get to be an early riser, I think. I think that's kind of a really important thing to do, to at least give it a shot, because you might find out that just waking up a few hours early, you're actually going to be able to stay much more productive. So see you guys, and we'll catch you next time.